Hello, good morning or good afternoon from whatever time zone you're currently in. Thank you for joining us for today's exciting webinar on the dynamic landscape of governance, risk, and compliance, GRC, and our ever-evolving, sorry, I got a little error on my thing, our ever-evolving digital world. My name is Danielle Lloyd-Tate, and I will be the moderator for today's conversation. I am the lead product marketing manager for the LevelBlue team, supporting our consulting and professional services portfolio. In today's session, we will be diving deep into how automation can transform GRC challenges into strategic opportunities by teaming up with the LevelBlue and OneTrust. You'll discover ways to significantly reduce regulatory risk, enhance productivity, and boost privacy management. Our agenda is packed with valuable insights and actionable strategies. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end, but feel free to drop any of your questions in the chat throughout the session, and we'll address them live whenever possible. Now, let me present our panelists to you guys. Next, we'll have Bindu, or I shouldn't say next. First, we'll have Bindu Sundarasian, who is the Director of Consulting and Professional Services for LevelBlue. As a seasoned security expert, Bindu excels in customizing information security strategies to support business growth. Her extensive experience includes shaping enterprise security vision, strategies, and programs for Fortune 50 companies, ensuring the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information assets, and thereby protecting and enhancing significant revenue streams. Next, we have Carissa Brockman, who is an Associate Director of Consulting and GRC Services for LevelBlue. Carissa has over 25 years of security leadership and risk management experience with substantial success leading diverse cross-functional security and risk governance teams and the planning and analyzing and implementation of information security and privacy programs to support organizational business objectives. She specializes in delivering industry-leading cybersecurity strategies and services and building and training and leading high-performing teams. She has a Bachelor's of Arts in History and holds the CISSP, CDPSE, CIPM, RPA, and CCSFP. Carissa has delivered numerous webinars, published blogs, and served on panels evangelizing cybersecurity, governance, risk, and compliance. And our last panelist is Caitlin Archibald, who's a Senior Product Marketing Manager for OneTrust, focused on risk and compliance capabilities and solution areas. She is obsessed with learning and has over a decade of hands-on marketing experience. She uses this drive to engage customers and industry subject matter experts to identify market trends and business needs to strategize opportunities for innovation with products, R&D, and services. Working across teams for product development, sales, marketing, and leadership, she's responsible for go-to-market for risk and compliance. Archibald is a certified GRC professional and holds a Bachelor of Business Administration in Marketing and Finance from Kennesaw State University. Before joining OneTrust in 2019, Caitlin spent several years in Microsoft Enterprise Resource Planning, independent software channel at Vicinity Software as a marketing manager, delivering costing, quality analysis, and scheduling solutions for professional-based manufacturing organizations across food and beverage, craft brewing, and chemical manufacturing verticals. So now that we know who our panelists are today, let's get right into it and start our conversation. So to set the stage, let's discuss some of the driving forces and challenges with governance, risk, and compliance landscape. So Bindu, this first question is for you. Could you start by giving us a brief overview of how the landscape of GRC services have evolved in the recent years?
Great, of course. Thank you everyone for joining us. Of course, the topic of GRC and that landscape has evolved significantly, right? So, if you go back to the early years, we were always looking at GRC from that point of view of meeting a compliance obligation. And, today the trend has significantly changed, not only because of all the technological innovations that organizations are using, it's also about all of the rising regulatory complexities that we have today. Gone are the days when you can just meet your compliance obligations and manage risk from a reactive standpoint. You really have to pivot towards a more proactive integrated GRC strategy, right? So today it's all about sort of continuous compliance monitoring. You want to be able to emphasize your real-time risk posture view. And we are seeing that, shift has happened, for those of us that have been in the cyberspace, we've always sort of thought about GRC as that first step in terms of getting a budget approved, right? Hey, this is a compliance requirement. We need to meet it. So I'm going to get the funding for it. But today, GRC is now integral to cyber resilience, a business resilience. It's taken center stage, if you will, where organizations have to have, GRC from the point of aligning with their business objectives so that we can foster resilience and yet be adaptable constantly with both the dynamic threat landscape as well as the regulatory complexity that we face today.
Awesome. Thank you, Bindu. All right, next question. So we're seeing some alarming statistics on penalties for organizations failing to comply with new regulations, highlighting the increasing financial consequences of noncompliance. Now, I know that this is just one area that organizations are challenged with, which you kind of just touched a little bit on, Bindu. But can you elaborate further on the challenges that organizations are experiencing in the GR space, particularly with the expanding digital boundaries and data sprawl?
Yeah, definitely. If you want to categorize, sort of critical challenges in the GRC space, we could bucketize them into one being you have to adapt to these complex regulations. These regulations are evolving. We are having to stay compliant, and it's also staying up to date with all of the changing requirements, right? So, for example, when GDPR came about, it was the 72 hours to be able to report on an incident, right? Now you have the SEC regulations that is talking about not only reporting on these incidents, but to be able to have your risk frameworks outlined and established to be able to meet the benchmark of what is considered material or not. So you have to adapt to these complex regulations. You're focusing, heavily on data privacy as well as security. And we are seeing organizations struggle with needing to adapt to these regulations in terms of integrating both the cyber and the risk management view, right? So, earlier, if you thought about how, security controls were put together, it didn't really take into account for the fact that today we are going to be across cloud environments, we have remote access, we have IoT networks. So all of these have to come back and feed into sort of that risk management framework. Then the third, challenge is the limitations of these traditional manual processes, right? So if you think about compliance management and if you think about GRC overall, it was always thought of as that extremely time-consuming, lacking efficiency and reliability. And we've really come a long way from that view, where today you can adopt technology, different solutions, automation, so that you can manage your compliance posture as well as manage your risks in real time. And last but not the least, we are seeing a huge, challenge with respect to maintaining sort of supply chain security and third-party, risk management practices. So, if we were to look at, how the landscape has changed and what are the critical challenges, it's, to be able to deal with this constantly shifting regulatory landscape, to be able to know all of those cross-border compliance requirements, to monitor your compliance from a real-time view, the challenge with respect to all of the digital transformation that's taken place, and the fact that we've probably jumped the gun in terms of thinking about robust risk management versus digital transformation. Transformation has already happened. So we really need to have that effective sort of risk management frameworks in place. We seem to approach this from a resource-intensive view and lack of real-time insights, but we have to change that, right? We have to go with automated GRC solutions that can really enable that continuous compliance assessments as well as risk assessments. This is all about sort of faster data-driven decision-making, right? So to be able to get there, we really have to consider some emerging solutions and adopt sort of GRC technology platforms, right? Which is why it's timely that we're doing this with OneTrust, and we are focusing on the fact that this partnership is going to enable organizations to help automate some of that workflow, streamline the risk assessments, help monitor compliance in real time.
Awesome. Thank you, Bindu. Okay, this next question is directed to you, Carissa. How can organizations integrate GRC processes more effectively into their overall business strategies, and what are the benefits of this?
So, really the end goal of GRC professionals is to enable the business, but do it in a secure way in which we can help manage those risks. It's also an end goal of ours to create a culture that is risk and compliance aware, right? So to that end, we really need to be able to embed governance, risk, and compliance activities into the business, into business processes. So of course, as Bindu mentioned, we have to align the GRC program and processes with business strategy. That means, embedding risk management and compliance activities into daily operations instead of really viewing them as a separate function. We've talked a lot about moving security to the left in the SDLC process. This is all about also pushing security and integrating it into business processes, business workflows, establishing governance frameworks that clearly define the roles and responsibilities and decision-making structures that include, the business, not just security, not just privacy, but include stakeholders across the business. And then they understand their accountability for governance, risk, and compliance as well. As part of that, most organizations have enterprise risk management framework. Integrating cybersecurity and privacy risk management into ERM is essential. So you're establishing your risk appetite at the organizational level across all strategic risks to your business, including cybersecurity and privacy and other operational risks. Cybersecurity and privacy really have bubbled up to, as we all know, to the boards, and it's really a strategic risk to the business. So enabling business stakeholders to be able to gather information, help identify risks, help report risks, is integral to creating that integrated process. Integrating risk management into new products, new projects, any operational changes, and looking for ways for mitigation strategies and establishing controls that can be built into those daily workflows. I mean, easy example is embedding third-party risk assessments into procurement processes, for example. Given the challenges that Bindu just talked about, so many regulations, massive amounts of data to protect, the extended enterprise, so many third parties have access to company information, and of course, as we all know, shortage of resources. It's nearly impossible to operate a GRC program without that automation. And, really to assist our clients with formalizing, updating, maturing their GRC programs, we established this partnership with OneTrust. A current client that we have, like I'm sure many of you on this webinar have, multiple regulatory requirements they have to comply with. They have to adopt industry standard frameworks. And so this organization, we're actually helping them formalize their program, adopting the IT risk and compliance solution from OneTrust. We're developing their policies and reaching out to those stakeholders. It's maturing not only the, security and privacy organization, which is, heavily using the platform, but it's giving a way to kind of introduce those key stakeholders, the endpoints, if you will, in the business to learn the platform on a, very small scale. One of the things too is bringing our expertise so that we can help them deploy the software, but we also have the, security and privacy background where we can help them develop their policies and procedures, create, kind of some program leadership to help them not only mature their processes, but engage those business stakeholders in the process instead of waiting, instead of operating really in a vacuum. So, really by integrating these GRC processes into business processes, it has helped this organization, from a compliance perspective right now. They're delving into risk management, and they're also the stakeholders in the business are better informed on managing risk and helping to make those decisions in the business. And of course, because we're always wanting to do more with less, this is helping security and privacy professionals to really focus on more strategic things because they can use that automation to engage those business stakeholders, gather, risk data from them, and, creates visibility across the organization.
Awesome. Thank you, Carissa. Okay, Caitlin, this next question is for you. Now let's talk about the role of automation in GRC. Could you explain how utilizing GRC software and tools with LevelBlue and OneTrust can help to automate the processes and address the challenges that Carissa and Bindu spoke about a little while ago?
Yeah, of course. I thought you'd never ask. It's kind of a loaded question, though, also. So there's a lot of specific places I can take this, given just the nature of GRC and even our solution footprint. We operationalize privacy requirements. We help drive visibility in your third-party ecosystem, like Bindu and Carissa just spoke about, to better manage and reduce risk. But where I'm going to focus my answer, at least today, is really on the oversight aspect of it. Unless someone in the comments would like to hear otherwise, feel free to speak up. So really in that vein, it comes down to how do we solve some of the age-old challenges of managing the scope of my compliance, given that expansive breadth that Bindu and Carissa mentioned? How do we drive the deeper connection points with the business, getting a pulse on what's going on today, to Carissa's point about kind of taking it, be more intentional about by design processes there for real-time insights for today, and maybe even tomorrow, not just yesterday. And in that hindsight perspective, that's pretty common. And then lastly, reporting meaningful insights back to your leadership team, because this is an ongoing challenge, right? We've got all the data maybe, right? But then how do we express what's the net to my board and my leadership team on why this is important? Going beyond what Bindu mentioned, even as compliance is just kind of like a means to organize a budget request, right? These are real-time manifestations of processes and operations and negative and possible opportunities when we think about impact to the business. So really the main area that we think about is how do we drive efficiency and precision with how we're managing even existing data frameworks. For many of you guys, like a top 5 frameworks I'd put out there, like ISO, like GDPR, PCI DSS, or NIST. There's often close to like a 40% overlap, give and take, some percentage points across these. And most organizations are managing many, not just regulations, but even voluntary standards and frameworks, right, to prove that you're doing what you say you do in market to your customer base and getting third-party validation of that. So a key consideration to think about for GRC technology is how is your strategy and technology stack driving efficiency here? Because a lot of organizations will actually leverage like a common controls framework or even develop their own custom or master approach for how compliance is defined within your organization, which is an amazing asset to have for that macro view. But a couple of areas where we are unique and where that approach kind of can fall apart is when you're going through a third-party audit or a certification. Because one point here is that, you know, an auditor is going to be referencing some of these specific framework controls here. But more importantly here is that we really want to be careful not to overshare in today's environment. And this isn't an effort to hide anything from, you know, an audit engagement, but it's really about de-risking your already overextended data footprint, you know, because the more you share, simply the more is out there. So our technology, when we think about driving efficiency and managing multiple frameworks and accelerating your posture here, is to really take a different approach in how we structure, monitor, and break down compliance, mapping them at the operational or evidence level to identify what documentation is required to demonstrate compliance. And where this helps accelerate value for clients and working across their ecosystem is it drives accuracy in how you account for the complete scope of work that's ahead of you, drives precision in how you report against one framework to another, and it creates agility in how you can actually adapt to new framework and evolving requirements. Because if they're designed with risk in mind, like Carissa talked about, right? Like getting to the nitty gritty of like, what is the business actually doing? You'll actually kind of have a stronger test of time there than some of the framework and regulation text as it stands. So there's a really good balance in partnering with an organization like LevelBlue that can bring that aggregated experience and perspective and processes to designing your program, right? And having a technology provider that can effectively and efficiently measure and monitor that data. And so I focused the first part here on that compliance breakdown for the piece of this. But the other side of this is also how do I, you know, effectively layer that on to measure the execution across my organization? You're making sure that I understand the context of my high-risk areas of the business. Where is PII? You know, where is QE? Are these my critical assets? How is this manifesting across my third-party network? Right? Balancing that regulatory intelligence with a complete scope of your digital ecosystem there is really kind of where OneTrust as a technology provider can come in and drive those deep contextual insights for you beyond some of this immediate efficiencies from compliance reporting. And beyond that, we talked a lot about digital transformation, right? Like everybody's gone through it and most organizations are still going through some aspect of digital transformation. And a great thing about this broad digital ecosystem, to caveat, right, like the exposure, is that there are a lot of digital receipts that can go and be captured. And there are a ton of paths for repeatability here as well that scale not just within a single organization, but the market as a whole. So when we think about the fact that there are like 3 major players in the cloud infrastructure space, right? It's like Google, Azure, AWS. Services for data encryption at rest, for an example, super common requirement across regulations, you know, GDPR being one of them, across all of your security certifications here. It's not something that every business should have to go and build a custom path for, because managing APIs can be kind of a nightmare, to just put it really frankly, and it can just be a big tax on your IT organization as a whole. So OneTrust is we ship with an entire library of ready to activate integrations that are purpose built to capture specific evidence, that's specific data sets, to effectively monitor your compliance posture, right? Because we are only grabbing what's needed to demonstrate a compliance requirement, because we've already gone down and broken down that level of detail with our content overall. So one piece here for GRC technology, of course, is having that measurable breakdown of content. The second piece here is having automation paths to help accelerate your monitoring efforts without having to interrupt the business. Chris had talked a lot about this, right? How do we go and kind of like make it forward facing for them? How do we make it a seamless experience for stakeholders who are not compliance efforts, who are not everyday GRC users? That's a key area that we are focused on really leaning in to solve and drive solutions around. And so when you build a highly repeatable compliance infrastructure like this, you're also scaling this. So ultimately what you're doing is you're scaling your ability to reduce regulatory risk of noncompliance. But the other thing you're doing is you're reinforcing mitigation efforts when it comes to data risk, right? So there's a rhyme and reason to a lot of the changes we see going into effect across standards, frameworks, regulations like DORA, and it's really in an effort to catch up with the changing threat landscape. Okay, and so I don't think it's a secret, like 60% or so of leaders in the private sector and about like 65% in the public sector truly believe that cyber and privacy regulations do help them reduce risk holistically, given the nature of just that digital ecosystem. So your compliance infrastructure and kind of being forward facing and how we adapt and adopt some of these new regulations is actually a scalable engine and methodology to accelerate how you adopt best practices in protecting your business and ultimately enabling the responsible use of data. And so that's how it is really from that oversight function. And then, of course, we have a variety of perspectives when it comes to driving that transparency across your third-party ecosystem and even fully automating some of the tasks required for privacy requirements as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, next question is right back at you. I missed the slide, sorry. Okay, so some clients recognize up to 75% in efficiency and productivity enhancements based on process automation and platform administration. I know you kind of touched on some of this. Can you just dig deeper into what those productivity gains look like and how it scales within an organization?
Yeah, so just to double click into one thing I've already mentioned, right, is like automated evidence collection. Can you imagine, think about the time it takes for you to send Bob an email, ask for a piece of data, for him to go screen grab it, they'll put it back in a response and send it to you. Like, how do we just eliminate that exchange altogether and reduce the time lag from hours to minutes to, hey, I actually just put this on a running cadence and I didn't even have to ask for the information, right? Like it's right here in my inbox. So that's a key area where if you can accelerate any percentage of evidence needed for a compliance requirement, and again, a lot of it is technical, it's very prime and it's highly measurable within your organization. But when we think about kind of driving efficiency more holistically across GRC, it really comes down to a balance for us. And from a platform perspective, one of the unique things about OneTrust is configurability. Okay, elevating your ability to just get in a system that has a lot of purpose-built and ready-to-use content, but that you can tailor to your unique operations. Right? Because some point solutions will be very rigid and right, like they solve a very specific problem that's defined in the market, but every organization does things a little bit differently, is what we find. And so having that balance so that you can seamlessly tailor things without over constructing a customization that'll lock you in a point in time solution, right? Like that will actually hold you back from evolving long term with the market is a key balance that we think about. The other thing about this is if you can reduce the need to go in and customize your application, you think about the unrealized value that you can then focus on when you're partnering with a service provider or any kind of like value-added reseller, such as LevelBlue. LevelBlue, right? You can eliminate the need to scope some of the more technical requirements because they're easily configurable and you can easily kind of put these things together and focus on more strategic initiatives, right? Like, hey, what is the best practice and what we should think about for refining our policy, as Carissa was talking about, right? Like they're kind of in the trenches there at the top level. What is the North Star guidance that we need to deliver to our business that keeps us, right, ahead of the threat landscape from a risk perspective, helps, cover whatever compliance obligations or requirements that we might have. And again, that fits best with our overall business objectives, our missions, and the things that we need to achieve and the processes that are already in place. Because the last thing you want to do is just kind of go in and state a policy that doesn't fit the business, because you're going to just be met with immediate friction. All right. And LevelBlue has that aggregated insight where they can come in and really enrich and lean into those processes. And you can really focus on leaning into that area rather than incurring any level of technical debt. Beyond that, right, it's really about I talked about evidence collection, which is highly measurable. When the next thing is when it comes to control management, which is one of the dullest topics, frankly, right? But it's how do we reduce the need for a lot of manual workarounds, driving better insights into how we are maturing processes across our organization. And it's really about having a variety of connected insights to actually make those decisions. Okay, staying ahead of the curve for different regulatory updates as well. And there's a lot of prime opportunity in the market, right, for AI to be an accelerator there. Even just traditional AI, they think about like machine learning, natural language processing. I mean, how many of you on the line today respond to security questionnaires as an example? Right? There's a lot of redundancy and manpower that is actually done in kind of translating your internal controls to a customer or any other kind of like request for information or RFI there. And AI is a great accelerator where we can better massage those things together, even before getting to like some of the generative capabilities that are prime for the taking. So those are some of the areas, but one of the most scalable piece of automation is really tied around how we can accelerate your ability to action automation through configuration.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, we have our last question, and this is going to be directed to all three of you guys, if you'd like to kind of everyone chime in, and we can start with, Carissa and Bindu, if you want to chime in, so Caitlin can take like a quick water break, because I know she's had back-to-back questions. So here's the question for you guys. Considering, sorry, I have to keep, my computer is acted up for those on the phone, so I have to keep tag teaming on another screen. So considering that the number of global cybersecurity-related regulations has surged by 40% in recent years, with examples like CISA and the EU NIS2 directives introducing tighter reporting and risk management requirements, what do you guys see as the future of GRC, and how can organizations stay ahead of the curve in terms of GRC practices?
Yeah, so I'll start and then I'll turn it to Carissa. I think, it's going back to the basics and the fundamentals, right? So, if you look at all of these regulations and sort of think about the intent of the requirement versus just the words of that requirement, it all goes back to really thinking about it. And I know I'm simplifying it. It is about having a baseline for risk management, being able to focus not just on a one-time, hey, am I meeting a compliance requirement, not treating this sort of as that checklist view, and being able to really embed sort of that risk reduction, resilience as the goal within your organization, and not treat each of these as a one-off, right? So, you shouldn't be looking at managing compliance across global regulations as a one-time annual activity. And which is why that automation, like Caitlin was pointing out, becomes critical, because a lot of these are mundane sort of set of tasks that you have to do and go about this on sort of regular basis. This has to become your BAU. Then it becomes easier for you to keep up with that one nuanced like regulation or one nuanced requirement that you have to go tweak and keep up with. We have also seen clients that sort of take this approach of, let's just look at the most stringent of the requirements, set the bar there, and then we look to meet that, and then that way it standardizes sort of and elevates sort of your GRC game, if you will. So we've seen customers do that as well. So I'd say, going back, there is really no secret sauce or sort of that miracle, right? This is going to be the way we operate in terms of having a sound risk management practice, focusing on the fundamentals, getting these compliance requirements, not as a one-off or an annual audit type thing. This has to become how we really run business and how we operate in terms of resilience. Because I truly believe, and we've seen it with many customers, once you really think about business resilience with the lens of a cyber resilience, these types of activities will sort of become more embedded within your teams and organization versus treating it as sort of a checklist one-off. Carissa, anything to add there?
Yeah, it is, I'm thinking about a few clients that we're working with, and, establishing that foundation or having those fundamentals in place is critical. But the great thing now is we can establish that foundation or those fundamentals using a platform and integrating automation off the bat, right? Yeah. And it's already showing dividends in our clients because they've worked through establishing those practices within the platform, engaging the stakeholders, getting those mundane tasks, as you mentioned, Bindu, done early in the game, and establishing the program, right? So now the program is, I don't want to say running on its own, but there's a lot of automation integrated. They know when they have to, collect manual evidence, or evidence is collected, automatically for them. It's scheduled, it's on a cadence. There's dashboards where they can see, where are we, what's coming up next from a compliance perspective. But also they have that data within the platform to make those, risk-informed decisions. So, it's growing on those fundamentals so you can then also mature your program, right? Yeah. So now we're moving into a more proactive state of risk management instead of a reactive state.
Yeah, and that's a great point, right? So we have a question where, what size of companies can benefit from this platform and what types, right? So I'd say, anybody that has, let's say, more than 2 compliance requirements to keep up with, which most of us do, and, we are in an environment where we have to do more with less. And you make a great point there, like gone are the days where establishing this fundamental approach requires an extensive manual resource-intensive effort. Now, thanks to platforms like OneTrust, you can sort of hit the ground running quickly and then build on that maturity and, your overall sustainable compliance journey versus, looking at, sort of slowly going through this, right? So I'd say, it's a great point about leveraging the automation and the platform. And this would be applicable to any type of organization, any size that has to deal, I'd say, with more than 2 regulations. Back to you, Daniel.
Yep. Caitlin, anything from you want to add? Or I know it's been doing Chris on a bunch, but anything you wanted to piggyback on? Okay. I'm going to take your silence as a no. Okay. Thank you guys so much. That was really great, and I appreciate that little ad hoc Bindu jumping in at the last one so I could give Caitlin a breather break. But let's take some questions. So we've got a couple of questions that have came up in the chat, and we'll just kind of round robin these, if you will. So what size companies can benefit from this platform?
Yeah, I just answered that with Carissa, but Caitlin, if you feel like you want to add more to that.
Oh, sweet. No, we'll just go to the next one. What are the most common business app integrations you get from the clients?
I would say, again, as we're trying to create, integrating GRC into the business and into daily, business processes and daily functions, we're looking at ticketing systems, HR systems to, integrate all employees into the platform, AD, of course, to, do the same. In terms of looking at kind of holistic risk, we're also seeing more like, vulnerability management systems, so they can integrate that data into GRC platforms, things like that. So we can, again, enable the business and engage the business, but then B, also look at risks holistically across the organization.
Okay, great. Next question. What are some of the challenges that occur when automating a GRC program?
So, I'll throw out a couple challenges that we've seen, and Bindu and Caitlin, feel free to chime in here. One, of course, is, which we've talked a lot about, is, aligning the program and the implementation of the software with business strategies. But get your business case approved, right? So that you have funding and executive support. Secondly, don't try to boil the ocean. Sometimes there's too many features that, GRC professionals want to use at first, which can overwhelm the organization, or, complex frameworks, GRC frameworks, et cetera. It's better to kind of start with a more focused approach and then scale gradually. That's what we've been doing with a lot of our clients who have been implementing the program and, creating that foundation. So, we're starting, with the policies, getting the business engaged, and we're starting with one framework at first. And then we can, that's from kind of a compliance perspective. And now we're building in more of the risk management functions. So if you can kind of take the crawl, walk, run approach, it's, of course, more palatable for the folks that are running the program, but also for the business stakeholders that need to be a part of it. And also, really making sure you have a communication plan. I mentioned, organizational change management, right? There's a lot that needs to be communicated. The organization needs to be educated, and they need to kind of embrace the processes. So it's important to stay ahead of that. And then lastly, I'll just mention, lack of skilled resources in terms of the deployment, as well as kind of coupling that with subject matter expertise. When we work with our clients, we offer a couple different models: a managed security kind of MSP model, where we're helping them really, again, mature the programs and deploy the software, and helping them manage it throughout the year or 2 years. And we're also then working with them to kind of educate, train, on the software itself, but also we're able to offer that, security and privacy expertise in building out the program. So I'll stop there and let Bindu or Caitlin jump in too.
Hey, yeah, I think you covered it there, Carissa, but I think, at the end of the day, it's this whole GRC automation, it's about integrating multiple systems, right? So you're going to have, like, say, your ERP system, your CRM system, all these third-party, tools that you have, they all have to sort of come together. And you made a great point about communication, right? This is not only about communication between systems, it's especially when you have legacy environments involved, it's about communication between the stakeholders and the folks that typically do this on a day-to-day basis. Because again, you're relying on sort of accurate and clean data to be able to have that consistency in this automation. You also want to make sure your team is on board and you're really articulating sort of the value of this. We've all been there, right? Because the moment an automation is brought into picture, the feeling is this going to impact my job? No, it's about focusing on the strategic aspects of your role and leveraging this automation and the tool to be able to really showcase value in terms of risk reduction and maintaining compliance versus, doing sort of the tactical day-to-day that is, sort of manual, resource intensive processes, right? So you want to make sure, if you are getting cultural resistance, right, reach out to subject matter experts who've done this for other organizations such as us. We can show you, how to win over sort of that business case that talks about GRC automation and how, we can showcase expertise in both sort of risk management and the tool itself. But the key is you want to be able to balance sort of the automation of this GRC, but with human oversight, right? Like in the sense that you are your business's subject matter experts, and you can leverage this tool to be able to add value to your organization versus thinking about it as like, is this going to impact my job, right? So this is really going to showcase your value to the organization in terms of risk reduction and sustaining compliance, right? So I'd say, that's something to think about as you're approaching this within your organization.
Hey there, are you able to hear me?
Now, yes.
Oh, goodness. Sorry about that, everyone. Massive technical difficulties. So would not be an online experience without that. I know, Bindu, Chris, I was able to hear your answers throughout my downtime, but I want to just take a moment to circle back to Danielle's last question, because I think a lot of it also stands on how we see the future of GRC. Danielle, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. So just to kind of add on and give a little bit of perspective that I think everyone's kind of touching on what Chris is seeing with stakeholders, what Bindu is seeing from a strategy perspective. I think a lot of it for us at OneTrust is really how do we think about breaking down the 3 lines of defense? And it's not literally or systematically, but a GRC solution and having a GRC solution that's better suited to flow across these different altitudes of the business, right? A business first experience that's really consumer grade to drive adoption and therefore insights into your business. The second line, just continued innovation to scale efficiency. But honestly, GRC has always been there for you. Like most of you on the line are the second line stakeholders. And less for audit, but more for leadership. How do we drive those integrated, connected insights to expedite your ability to make decisions? I think, Carissa, you talked about this a lot in practical examples of reducing the time to make decisions. Like that's a common goal that we hear across stakeholders. And it's reducing the time it takes to make those decisions is really about already having the complete insight and being able to seamlessly level it up to those executive boards, right? A couple things where I see this manifesting, and to just kind of piggyback on even some of the earlier comments, Bindu, that you made around like the SEC regulation, how we're aligning incident reporting to how you structured your risk management methodology. That's a massive scale of connectivity. And it's actually a direct evidence of that bending of the lines where every spoke on the wheel has some level of accountability, because we want to understand why this incident happened, and was it accounted for previously? How did you guys review it, even with your audit partner, and from your 10K perspective, right? Like, that is a much more holistic view to thinking about how that incident or risk overall like manifested in the business, to try to get ahead of it overall. And then the same thing is taking that more holistic kind of broken down perspective to your third-party ecosystem, third-party risk to resilience, okay? Not just like, is this going to be negatively impactful to my business overall, but like, will this provider potentially take down my entire business and or other, stakeholders who are also leveraging them? And we saw that with data breaches, or like really vulnerabilities that happened just this past year, where massive companies, massive companies and small companies were taken down for days at a time when they could not resolve the incident, fastly and rapidly. And that's really more so like, did we as an organization specifically understand how entrenched we were with this vendor? And then that's kind of the epitome of DORA as well, where we want to make sure that that isn't happening systematically across a specific industry, where a particular vendor monopoly there could have that level of cascading impact across various stakeholders. So wanted to just kind of add in that color, where we see that integrated methodology being critical across, all of these stakeholders from a GRC solutions perspective.
Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, I know we are close to time. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I think we were able to get all of them answered. Double checking. If we missed one for some reason, or you have another one, feel free to include it and we can reach back out to you with our responses. With that said, thank you guys all for participating in today's insightful webinar on the evolving landscape of governance, risk, and compliance, where we discussed how automation can turn GRC challenges into strategic advantages, significantly reducing regulatory risk, enhancing productivity, and improving privacy management. The engagement today and the questions that you guys asked and just the conversation in general has been really great, and it's really made this session very interactive. So I also really quickly want to just give a special thanks and shout out to our panelists from our LevelBlue team, Carissa and Bindu, and Caitlin from our OneTrust team for their invaluable contributions. I hope everybody has a great day, and we look forward to connecting with you in future sessions. Bye.
Thank you.